When you strip life down to its core, most people don't fail because of their lack of ability. They fail because of their abundance of excuses. Think about it. Excuses are the invisible chains we wrap around ourselves to justify why we're not where we want to be. They're comfortable, they're familiar, and they're convincing. You tell yourself you don't have enough time, or you don't have the resources, or you're waiting for the right moment. But here's the truth. There is no right moment. The perfect conditions you're waiting for are never coming. If you're serious about building the life you want, you have to stop waiting for the noise to quiet down and instead learn how to silence it yourself. The grind begins the second you shut your mouth and let your actions speak. That's where most people get stuck. They think they need to explain themselves. They want the approval of their friends, their family, their colleagues. They spend more time justifying their intentions than actually moving toward them. It's almost as if they believe talking about the dream is equivalent to living it. But here's the psychological trap. Every time you talk about what you're going to do instead of doing it, you give your brain a small hit of satisfaction. That little release tricks you into thinking progress has been made, when in reality you're standing still. And let's be clear, silence doesn't mean repression. I'm not saying you should never share your goals. What I am saying is that constant broadcasting of your intentions drains you of the energy you need to execute. Silence is about focus. It's about removing distractions, both external and internal, so that all that remains is the work. Because when the work is in front of you, there's no room for excuses. It's you, your will, and the grind. Philosophically, excuses are fascinating because they allow us to maintain our identity without confronting our failures. They give us a sense of safety. I could have succeeded if the circumstances were different. It's a brilliant trick of the ego. Excuses preserve our pride by blaming external conditions. But the cost of that preservation is progress. You hold onto your image of potential, but you never get to realize it. The grind asks you to make a different trade. Let go of pride in exchange for progress. Stop explaining why you're not there yet and start proving that you can be. This is where silence becomes powerful. When you choose to stop talking and start doing, you take back authority over your life. You're no longer outsourcing your future to luck, timing, or validation. You become responsible, and responsibility, though heavy, is liberating. It means you're not at the mercy of excuses anymore. You don't need someone else to give you permission. You don't need the stars to align. You just need to move. Now, of course, the grind isn't glamorous. No one applauds you in the early mornings or the late nights. No one claps when you choose to study instead of scroll, or when you put in the extra hours instead of binging another show. But that's the point. The grind is quiet. It's invisible. It doesn't need recognition because it's fueled by something deeper than attention. It's fueled by necessity. When you realize that excuses don't serve you, silence becomes the natural response, and in that silence, you get to work. The deeper truth is that action itself is the antidote to fear. Most excuses are nothing more than fear dressed up in reasonable clothing. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of being exposed as not good enough. So we say, I don't have time, or it's not the right season, when what we really mean is, I'm afraid. But when you move anyway, when you act despite fear, you dismantle the excuse at its core. You prove to yourself that the fear is survivable. And once you know that, the grip of excuses weakens forever. There's a kind of respect the world gives to people who grind in silence. You notice it, people who don't spend their time justifying or explaining, but instead let their results show. They may not talk much, but when they walk into a room, you know they've been putting in the work. That's the kind of presence silence builds. It's not about being flashy, it's about being undeniable. So the challenge for you is simple: shut up and grind. Cut the excuses at their root. Stop giving them oxygen. Don't announce your plans to the world as if that makes them real. Don't explain why you can't start. Don't overthink the perfect timing. Just begin. One small action today speaks louder than 1,000 promises about tomorrow. At the end of the day, no excuse will ever build your dream. Only action will. And the quieter you become, the louder your results will be. Close your mouth, open your will, and let the grind be your voice. Motivation is intoxicating, isn't it? It feels good. It feels like fuel. You watch a video, hear a speech, read a quote, and suddenly you feel unstoppable. You tell yourself you're ready, you're committed, you're locked in, and then, the next morning, that feeling is gone. The spark is cold, you're tired, you're stressed, life has pulled you back into its gravity, and now you're right where you started. That's the problem with motivation. It's inconsistent. It's emotional. It's not designed to last. If you depend on it, you'll always be at the mercy of your moods. Discipline, however, is different. Discipline doesn't care how you feel. It doesn't negotiate with your emotions. It doesn't require a pep talk. Discipline is the quiet agreement you make with yourself that says, no matter how I feel, I show up. It's not exciting, but it's reliable. It's not glamorous, but it's transformative. If motivation is lightning, discipline is electricity. It sustains, it powers, it endures. Psychologically, this is where most people go wrong. They chase the high of motivation instead of cultivating the habit of discipline. Motivation makes you feel inspired. Discipline makes you effective. Think about it. Anyone can do the work when they feel like it. Anyone can grind when the energy is there, when the environment is perfect, when the playlist is right. But discipline is what separates the committed from the casual. It's the willingness to act in the absence of desire. And paradoxically, that's what builds real confidence. Because every time you show up despite resistance, you prove to yourself that your will is stronger than your feelings. That proof becomes unshakable. Philosophers throughout history have recognized this truth. The Stoics, for instance, didn't preach chasing pleasure or waiting for inspiration. They spoke about the discipline of virtue, the strength of character, the power of enduring what must be endured. Marcus Aurelius didn't wake up every morning motivated to lead an empire. He woke up disciplined to fulfill his duty. That distinction matters because it's not about waiting for the mood to strike. It's about honoring a standard regardless of mood. And let's be honest, discipline is uncomfortable. It demands that you move when you'd rather rest. It demands that you practice when you'd rather play. It demands that you focus when distraction calls your name. But it's in that discomfort that greatness is born. Every champion, every master, every person you admire has built their life on the back of discipline, not motivation. You don't see the mornings they didn't want to get up, the nights they wanted to quit, the countless repetitions they endured. But that's where the transformation happened, when they refused to let their feelings decide their future. The irony is that discipline eventually creates the very motivation you're waiting for. When you consistently show up, you begin to see progress. And progress is motivating. The days stack up, the skills sharpen, the results appear. Suddenly, you don't need external hype to keep going. You have evidence. You look back and realize, I've come too far to stop now. That's the power of discipline. It builds momentum that motivation alone could never sustain. Now here's the trap many fall into. They confuse intensity with discipline. They go hard for a week. They sprint out of the gate. They burn with passion, and then they collapse. Discipline is not about burning out in a burst of effort. It's about pacing yourself with consistency. It's the daily showing up, even in small ways, that creates exponential growth. Intensity fades, consistency compounds. That's why discipline beats motivation every time. Think about how this applies to your own life. If you waited until you felt like going to work, you'd be unemployed. If you waited until you felt like eating healthy, you'd be sick. If you waited until you felt like showing love, your relationships would crumble. Life doesn't reward you for waiting for feelings. It rewards you for honoring your commitments. The grind is no different. Success is not a reward for those who are inspired. It's a consequence for those who are disciplined. The truth is, motivation is easy, discipline is rare, and that's why it's valuable. Anyone can post about their goals, get hyped in the moment, and dream big. Few can quietly, consistently, day after day, execute. But those few, those are the ones who build legacies. Because at the end of the day, discipline is not about forcing yourself to do what you hate. It's about aligning your actions with the person you've decided you want to become, regardless of temporary resistance. So the question you need to ask yourself isn't, do I feel like it? The real question is, am I disciplined enough to do it even when I don't? That's the dividing line. That's where success lives. Motivation may light the fire, but only discipline keeps it burning. Stop waiting to feel ready. Start training yourself to be ready. That's the grind. We live in a culture addicted to novelty. Everyone wants the next big thing, the shortcut, the hack that will skip the grind and fast, track them to success. But here's the truth people don't like to hear. Greatness is not built in moments of inspiration or breakthroughs. It's built in the quiet, repetitive routines that no one applauds. The grind is not fireworks, it's bricklaying. It's doing the same small, often boring, often invisible actions over and over until something extraordinary emerges from the ordinary. Repetition doesn't look exciting from the outside. It looks monotonous, it looks dull, but it's in that monotony that transformation happens. Think about it. An athlete doesn't become world-class because they hit one perfect shot. They become world-class because they've repeated that shot 10,000 times when nobody was watching. A writer doesn't become a master because they wrote one brilliant paragraph. They become a master because they wrote 1,000 mediocre drafts until brilliance emerged through the process. Repetition is the soil in which mastery grows. Without it, nothing can take root. The psychology behind this is simple but profound. The brain learns through patterns. Neural pathways strengthen when you repeat the same action consistently. Every repetition is a vote for the identity you're trying to build. You're not just doing push-ups, you're reinforcing the identity of someone disciplined. You're not just practicing scales on a piano. You're training your brain and fingers to move as one. Repetition is not about the task, it's about the transformation. The task is just the tool, but here's the problem. Most people quit when it gets boring. They interpret boredom as a sign that something's wrong. They think, if I'm not excited, if I'm not constantly stimulated, maybe this isn't for me. But boredom is not a signal to stop. It's a sign you're finally entering the zone where growth happens. The human mind craves novelty because it's easier. It's exciting to start, thrilling to imagine, but the middle, the long stretch of repetition, that's where dreams die for most. And that's why embracing boredom is essential. The grind requires you to push past the need for constant stimulation and instead find meaning in consistency. Philosophically, there's something almost spiritual about repetition. Monks chant the same prayers every day, not because the words change, but because the practice transforms them. Artists sketch the same lines, dancers rehearse the same steps, speakers practice the same delivery. It's through repetition that they carve depth into their craft. The work doesn't get easier, you get better. And the only way you get better is by showing up again and again, even when it feels like nothing is happening. Now, let's address the resistance. Repetition feels tedious because the results are delayed. In a world of instant gratification, we want the outcome immediately. But repetition demands patience. It asks you to trust the process long before the payoff. That's why most people never reach mastery. They stop watering the seed before it breaks the soil. They forget that the grind doesn't reward speed, it rewards persistence. This is where your perspective matters. If you view repetition as punishment, you'll resent it. But if you view it as progress, you'll endure it. In fact, you can train yourself to love it. The best in any field are not those who tolerate the grind, but those who embrace it. They find joy in the process itself, even in the repetition that others find boring. Why? Because they understand that every rep, every practice, every small act is another step in building something that will outlast the moment. And let's not pretend this is easy. The grind will test your patience. It will make you doubt. It will whisper that nothing is changing, that you're wasting your time. But that's an illusion. Change is happening beneath the surface. You may not see it daily, but over time, repetition rewires your mind, your body, your habits. Then one day, you look back, and the person you've become is unrecognizable from the one who started. That's the gift of repetition. It transforms you so gradually you don't notice until the results are undeniable. So what do? You show up, you repeat, you do the work again and again. You commit not to the excitement of the moment, but to the discipline of the process. Because success doesn't belong to the one who starts with the most energy, it belongs to the one who stays through the boredom. Embrace the repetition, learn to love the monotony, because in that silence, in that sameness, you are building something remarkable. The grind isn't about chasing excitement, it's about enduring the ordinary long enough to create the extraordinary. We live in a world obsessed with noise. Everywhere you look, people are broadcasting their plans, their goals, their ambitions. Social media has made it easy to announce what you're going to do before you've even taken the first step. And it feels good, doesn't it? To say it out loud, to declare it boldly, to let others know you're on your way. But here's the danger. The more you talk about what you're going to do, the less urgency you feel to actually do it. Words create the illusion of progress. They give you the appearance of movement without the reality of motion. And that's where most people get stuck. They confuse talking about change with making change. Results, on the other hand, need no introduction. They don't need hype. They don't need explanation. They don't even need you to defend them. Results are self-evident. When you've put in the grind, when you've endured the silence of discipline and repetition, the results speak for you louder than any announcement ever could. And unlike words, results cannot be debated. You can argue with an opinion, but you cannot argue with evidence. You can doubt a person's intentions, but you cannot deny their achievements. Psychologically, This is powerful because human beings are wired to seek validation. We want to be seen, we want people to recognize our effort, but if recognition becomes your fuel, you'll run out long before the finish line. Because the grind is not glamorous, it's lonely, it's unseen, and if you're constantly chasing applause to keep going, you'll burn out. The people who win are the ones who shift their focus from recognition to results. They stop wasting energy proving themselves in words and redirect that energy toward proving themselves in action. There's also a philosophical depth here worth noticing. Talk is tied to ego, results are tied to reality. The ego wants to be admired, praised, noticed. Reality doesn't care about your ego. It only reflects what you've actually done. The person who speaks endlessly about their potential is living in ego. The person who puts their head down and builds quietly is living in reality. And reality, though silent, always wins. Think about the people who inspire you most. Are they the ones constantly announcing their goals, or are they the ones whose work is undeniable? The artist whose craft speaks for itself, the entrepreneur whose results changed industries, the athlete whose performance silences every critic. The respect they command is not because of what they said. They've earned it by showing up, grinding, and letting the work prove itself. That's what it means to let results be your voice. Now, some might ask, but isn't speaking your goals important? Doesn't it keep you accountable? To some extent, yes. But the problem is when talk replaces execution. If speaking your goals becomes a substitute for action, it weakens you. Accountability is only meaningful if it leads to follow through. Otherwise, it becomes empty theater. The real accountability is not in what you say, it's in what you deliver. And here's another truth: critics will always exist. The more you talk, the more room you give them to dissect your words, to argue, to doubt. But when you produce results, the conversation changes. You don't need to argue with someone about what you're capable of. The evidence ends the debate. That's why silence is powerful. Silence starves your critics, while results silence them forever. But this isn't just about silencing others. It's about sharpening yourself. When you decide to let results speak for you, you train yourself to focus only on what matters, the work. Every ounce of energy that might have gone into explaining, defending, or convincing is instead funneled into execution. And over time, that focus compounds. The person who talks less and does more always outpaces the person who talks more and does less. Always. This is the essence of the grind. It doesn't shout, it doesn't brag, it doesn't beg to be seen. The grind is silent, relentless, consistent. And then, one day, it's undeniable. You walk into a room, and your presence carries weight because people can see the results of the work you've put in. You don't have to say much. You don't have to justify yourself. Your results are the only introduction you need. So ask yourself, do you want to be known for what you said you'd do, or for what you actually did? Do you want to be remembered for promises or for proof? Because one leads to noise, and the other leads to legacy. Talk will always be cheap. Results will always be priceless. Don't argue, don't announce, don't explain, just grind, until the work itself makes you undeniable.